morning.
Good morning.
Please introduce yourself to the court and spell your last name for the record.
My name is J.C. Longstreet. That's Longstreet.
Mr. Longstreet, what do you do for a living?
Well, I run an amusement park right here in Midland. It's called Rock the World. There's no Disney. It keeps food on my table, which is good because I love to eat. So,
Mr. Longstreet, tell us a little bit about your job at the park.
Well, it's my job to make all the tough decisions for Rock the World. But outside of the logistics, I get to work with people, which is what I love most. One of the reasons I got into the entertainment business in the first place.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how your park operates. How do customers purchase admission to the park?
With wristbands. All customers must purchase wristbands to get into Rock the World.
How many types of wristbands do you sell?
We have two. We have our standard admission, which is $20, and then we have our VIP World Tour admission, which is $35. Personally recommend that one. I think it's a pretty sweet deal.
Now, you said that you sell two different types of wristbands. How do you keep track of how many wristbands are sold on a daily basis?
Well, all the wristbands that we pass up to our customers, they all have track numbers on them. That's the job duty of our ticket booth operator to keep track of those wristbands as they sell them throughout the day.
You just mentioned the ticket booth operator. Did you ever have an employee named Whit Bowman working in your ticket booth?
I did. In 2011, I hired Whit Bowman as our ticket booth operator. She then came back to work for the park in 2012.
Do you see Whit Bowman here in court today?
Yes, ma'am. She's the young lady sitting on the end of the table here with the all black on and the gray boots.
Your Honor, may the record reflect that the witness has correctly identified the defendant?
Any objection from the defense?
No objection.
The record will so reflect.
Now, you said that the defendant worked at your park in 2011 and 2012. Did she work again in the ticket booth in 2012?
Well, no. In 2012, Whit was moved to our ride. She became our ride operator after she recommended that I hire her friend Cameron to work in the ticket booth. She came to me. She said, "Mr. Longstreet, my friend Cameron would be perfect to work the ticket booth." She made him sound good to me, and I took her word for it and I hired him.
Well, let's talk about the year that the defendant's friend was working in your ticket booth. Do you know how many of your World Tour wristbands you sold that year?
I don't. And the reason is, the number of World Tour customers I was seeing in the park didn't match the number of World Tour customers that were being recorded for our financial records.
Your Honor, I'm approaching opposing counsel with what has been marked as States 1.
That's fine.
Permission to approach the witness of States 1?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Longstreet, I'm handing you States 1.
Thank you.
Please take a look at that and tell us what that is.
States 1 is a copy of Rock the World's profit and loss sheets.
Does it appear to be fair and accurate copies?
Seems to be intact.
Well, what information is used to make these records?
We take information such as our payroll, our maintenance fees. We include our sales on here like merchandise, concessions, and of course ticket sales.
Well, who makes these documents?
My accountant, she makes them. She brings them to me. I review them and approve them.
How often are they made and how often are they kept?
Well, all the information that is used to make the sheets, they're gathered at the end of every day, and then at the end of every month, we take that information and create these sheets.
Your Honor, it's at this time that the state moves to admit into evidence States 1.
Response from the defense?
I object to hearsay, Your Honor.
Response from the state?
Yes, Your Honor, we've laid the foundation for these records to fall under the hearsay exception 8036.
Which is?
The business records exception, Your Honor.
What does the defense say as to the state's position that this is a business record?
Your Honor, the state's objection to 8036 specifically is that the state has failed to meet the fifth prong of that qualification under that rule. Specifically, that prong is that neither the source of information nor the method of circumstances of preparation indicate a lack of trustworthiness. This witness has just testified that this document is untrustworthy. He's testified that he doesn't know how many World Tour wristbands were sold because of problems.
May I respond to that, Your Honor?
Interesting argument. Please do.
Your Honor, Part E of that exception indicates that there is a difference between trustworthiness and accuracy. We agree that for 2012, the count of wristbands was not accurate. This document is certainly not being offered to show that the numbers were in fact accurate. However, the way in which these documents were prepared that method does not indicate a lack of trustworthiness. And that's what Part E of this exception talks about. We've met all of the prongs under 8036 and therefore they are admissible.
Okay, I agree with Ms. Henschel, that objection will be overruled. You're certainly more than welcome to explore that issue on cross-examination.
Thank you.
Mr. Longstreet, a moment ago you told us that what you saw in your financial records didn't match what you saw in your park. What exactly did you see in the park?
Well, in the park, I was seeing way too many customers in our World Tour admission line. I also started seeing a wristband that was not park issued.
How did you know the wristband wasn't park issued?
Well, the wristband was a little faded in color, looked flimsy, but the biggest thing was the tracking numbers that's used on our wristbands. This wristband it didn't have.
Now, earlier you talked about the importance of that wristband system and the tracking number on the wristband. Mr. Longstreet, if wristbands didn't have that tracking number, would it be recorded in that document?
No, it wouldn't. Without the tracking number, there's no way for the ticket booth operator to keep count of that wristband.
What was different in the financial records than what you saw in your park?
Well, the financial records showed that we were selling a lot fewer World Tour wristbands. These records showed that we were losing thousands of dollars in profit from our ticket sales.
Well, after you saw that you were losing thousands of dollars from your ticket sales, what did you do?
Well, that's when I fired our ticket booth operator, Cameron Poole. I also hired a police investigator to confirm that suspicion.
Well, now, Mr. Longstreet, I'd like to turn your attention to the day of August 30th, 2012. Were you at the park on that day?
I was. August 30th was the day the incident took place at Rock the World, which led to one of my security guards, Officer Winston Thomas, losing his life.
Now, I realize that talking about this day, it might be difficult for you, but it's something that we need to cover. Where were you around 8 p.m.?
Around 8 p.m., I was in my office, which is when I heard the initial screams coming from my ticket booth. So I ran down to the ticket booth as fast as I could. That's when I saw my ticket booth operator on the ground. She was crying. She was quite upset.
Did you ask what happened?
I did. She told me that which friend had come to the park. He had
Objection,
a
Your
knife.
Honor. Hearsay.
Your Honor, these statements fall under the hearsay exception 8032. They are an excited utterance.
Response from the defense.
Your Honor, this exception is intended to be invoked as when a declarant is testifying in direct response to a then existing condition that is exciting them for some reason. Ms. Floyd in this situation is testifying after this condition occurred, after the alleged perpetrator has fled. This does not fit that exception.
Ms. Henschel, what evidence do we have that this statement is actually excited? In other words, how do we know that the declarant in this circumstance actually was under the stress of this condition?
Yes, Your Honor, the witness testified that he heard a scream, ran immediately to the ticket booth, and saw that ticket booth operator distressed on the ground, crying and upset. Now, 8032 does not give a specific time limit. It just says that the person must be under the stress of that excited event. Clearly, in this case, they were.
Okay, I agree, that'll be overruled.
Mr. Longstreet, when you asked your ticket booth operator what happened, what did she tell you?
She told me that Witt's friend had come to the park. He had a knife and he threatened her.
How?
He had a knife, threatened to carve her face up if she didn't give him all the money that she had in our ticket booth.
Now, if you're at the ticket booth, what's the fastest way out of the park?
Well, if you're at the ticket booth, you're at the main entrance or exit for Rock the World. So that would be your fastest way out.
Did you see where Cameron Poole ran?
Cameron actually ran the opposite direction of the exit into the park toward the rides.
Are there any other exits from the park?
The only other exit is located in the back of one of our rides called the Tunnel of Terror. There's an employee exit door there, but it's locked.
On August 30th, who did you assign to work that ride, the Tunnel of Terror?
The Tunnel of Terror was the assignment of another one of my former ride operators. Her name is Billy Isaacs, but we all call her Honey.
Did you ever give the defendant permission to operate that ride?
Absolutely not. In fact, the last time I talked to Whit, I actually gave her specific instructions to never operate the Tunnel of Terror.
Why?
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay.
The hearsay statement is the declarant telling your client not to operate the ride?
Correct, Your Honor. The declarant's previous out-of-court statement
Your Honor, this witness's statements, they're not being offered for the truth of what they assert. Whether they're being offered for the effect of the listener, the defendant in this case, and what she chose to do after she was told not to operate that rod.
Maybe heard on that, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
These statements are in fact being offered for the truth of the matter asserted. They can only have any meaningful effect on the defendant if she took those statements for the truth of the matter asserted. The truth of the matter is that she was not allowed to operate the ride. Without that truth value, these statements have no relevance.
Given the rules of this jurisdiction, of course, there are some jurisdictions in which hearsay is a statement made by an out-of-court declarant, and there are other jurisdictions in which a statement is an, or hearsay is an out-of-court statement made by an in-court declarant. Regardless, given the rules of this jurisdiction, it appears that this is hearsay, and so I will sustain that objection in the absence of some exception that would apply.
Your Honor, move to strike any testimony the witness gave. I believe he just started his answer.
Granted.
Now, Mr. Longstreet, you said that you saw the defendant operating the tunnel of terror. When you saw her operating that ride, what was she doing?
Well, she was experimenting with the ride in blackout mode.
What is blackout mode?
It's a maintenance feature on our rides, and when it's activated, all the lights on the ride, they shut off. You're in complete darkness, but the ride itself, it keeps moving.
When did you see the defendant operating the tunnel of terror in blackout mode?
A few days before August 30th.
Thank you. Your Honor, I have no further questions. May I approach the witness to retrieve previous